the community.
Hey, Equity Mate.
I just had a question.
Hey, Bryce, friend. I've got a question.
Your question answered.
Welcome back to Equity Mates. We have a question from James.
Mates, I've noticed in a few recent Equity Mates newsletters that several countries are throwing some serious cash into their defence budgets. The UK is adding 2.2 billion, Sweden's going from 2.4% to 3.5% of its GDP. Australia's looking at jumping from 59 billion this financial year to 74 billion by 2028. No doubt the US will be waltzing into this peacocking match with some big numbers too. Seeing this trend unfold, I was wondering if you have any thoughts on satellite ETFs as a way to capitalise on the pump in global defence spending.
Love it. Thanks for the question, James. If you want to ask a question, leave us a voicemail. There'll be a link in the show notes or the description below. We love hearing from you. Love the question, James. But yes.
Hold on. But while we're plugging things, if you want to be like James and keep your finger on the pulse with what's happening globally in business and in markets, much like James, sign up to the Equity Mates Daily email. Link is in the show notes.
All right, Ren. Well, let's get stuck into it. He's right. Defense is the I guess the word of the moment, or the thematic of the moment, outside of obviously global tariffs. Yeah. And it's been surging.
Sorry.
And Microsoft's birthday, all of that, yeah. Global defense spending is surging. It's projected to reach $2.6 trillion by the end of this year. US leading the way, $895 billion. Followed by China, $266 billion, and Russia, $126 billion. It still blows my mind, the discrepancy between first and second in defense spending. It is wild.
You want to see something wild? Look at the number of aircraft carriers in the world that the US has compared to like every other nation. Yeah. It's crazy.
We are cooked. We are
well,
cooked.
No, we're not cooked. As long as we sit under the US security umbrella, and as long as the US doesn't get too cooked, both of which are questioned in 2025.
It is questionable. But I think the crux of the story here, and James alluded to it, the real story playing out is actually in Europe. We are seeing an incredible acceleration of defence spending over in Europe. The European Commission have a plan called the Rearm Europe plan, aiming to mobilise 800 billion euros in defence spending over the next 4 years, including 150 billion in loans to member states. Germany, they have voted to exempt the defence spending from debt limits, enabling 500 billion euros to be spent and unlimited military investments beyond 1% of GDP. That is a huge change in their stance towards military spending. And estimates suggest a 20 to 30% increase year on year in defence budgets across Europe this year. Germany, France, Poland, all really leading the way. So the question is, like, how do we actually take this information and find some investment opportunities?
Yeah, well, that is in some cases, the $1 million question, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, you can start with stocks, and then we can roll into ETFs. And I think a lot of people have been asking this question around stocks because the European defense sector has done well. Rheinmetall, I'll give you one guess what company that comes from. What country that comes from? Germany, yeah. Up 124%. Thales up 81%. These are all year-to-date numbers as well. So like Rheinmetall has more than doubled in a quarter. Thales up 81%. Leonardo up 77%. Dassault Aviation up 57%. BAE Systems up 37%. So what we've covered Germany, France, Italy, France again, and then England to close it out. So all the Europeans are having a moment. The question becomes, what's priced in?
Yes, yeah.
And so you've got to do the work
Definitely.
The question for me also becomes, how protectionist will the Europeans get? Because there's no doubt a lot of these European armies want American hardware still. They still want to speak to the Lockheeds and the Boeings and the General Dynamics and the Raytheons of the world. Or will there be some restrictions and they need to buy from Europe?
So in terms of James's questions, what are some of the satellite ETFs? I think the first place to start is to really understand what you're getting exposure to through thematic ETFs, and looking under the hood is incredibly important, because whilst you might thinking you're getting defense exposure, it could be mixed up with aerospace and all sorts of random bits and pieces. So we've had a look at some of the Australian ETFs that specifically have some of the European companies that Ren just mentioned, because obviously that's where the money's being spent, or those are the ones that are benefiting. So 3 here in Australia: the BetaShares Global Defence ETF, ARMR, the VanEck Global Defence ETF, Defend, DFND, and the Global X Defence Tech ETF, DTEC. The BetaShares and VanEck Global Defence all have some of the companies that Men mentioned there: Ryan Metal, BAE, Thales. What did I say? Men.
Rather than Ren.
Oh, sorry, Ren. So those 3 are listed here in Australia.
So having a look at those 3 Aussie ETFs, they're all obviously majority US. And I say obviously just because the US is such a big market and that's where the biggest defense contractors are. Of the 3, the BetaShares one is most US, 62% at time of recording. VanEck is 53%. And Global X is 54%. Then the European countries, Germany, France, Britain, sort of come in next in all those ETFs. And then there's like a long tail, like Turkey's got a decent defense sector, South Korea pops up. Israel will be in them all as well. Australia probably gets a run in some of them. I can see in the Global X one where 0.1%. So yeah, you're probably not super bullish on the Australian defence sector.
No.
Although people were bullish on Drone Shield.
Yes, that's true.
Less now. But in terms of the top holdings, like they all look pretty similar.
Yeah.
I would say the Global X and the BetaShares ones look more similar. Like it really is like the big defence contractors. The VanEck one has some interesting names in there. So yeah, just go under the hood of the 3 ETFs and make sure you're comparing them and you. If you want to invest in them, invest in the one that most aligns with your thesis.
Yes. Globally, the US there's one listed in the US, Global X Defense Tech ETF. It's exactly the same as the DTech here. Ticker is SHLD. And then for Europeans, there's the Wisdom Tree Europe Defense ETF, and it's pretty heavily weighted to a number of the countries that companies that we spoke about.
Well, yeah, because it's the European one.
Yeah,
like
that's the OG.
Sorry, no. The reason I'm saying that, I think it's confusing. It's like it's focused on European companies, not for European investors.
Yeah. So look, there are plenty of options to get access to this thematic. Ren, you touched on it earlier, but for me, this is like you need to be aware of like the perils of thematic investing because a lot of these announcements have already been made and priced in. Like we've seen the growth of these companies. So you really got to consider like what is going to be that next leg up if you're going to start investing in these thematics now. And sometimes the hype is, I guess, more than the actual underlying fundamentals. Like these big dollar announcements, where is it actually going to be flowing and what is the impact to these companies? So yeah, something just to consider when thinking about these thematic ETFs. So
I want to close by posing the question, is this hack or is this semi? Because I think those 2 ETFs illustrate the duality, I guess, in these thematic ETFs. Because there's no doubt that this defense spending thematic makes sense.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt where this isn't the end of it. Like the flood of money is going to take years to roll out. And honestly, a number of commitments will probably only escalate because, it's one announcement leads to another.
Yeah.
So the thematic makes sense. The question, is it hack or is it semi, I think is important because hack for me, the BetaShares cybersecurity ETF is an example where the flood of money moving into cybersecurity has been relatively evenly distributed, like not perfectly distributed. There have been winners and losers, but the rising tide of cybersecurity spending has lifted most boats. And so the broad thematic ETF investing a bit in all these companies has made sense there. Compare that to semi, which is the thematic is a massive flood of money in spending in semiconductors. But really, investors would have been better off just buying NVIDIA than buying the Global X semiconductor ETF. Because sure, like AMD's done well and AMD's growing and like a couple of the other companies have done well. But at the same token, some of them are down. Like ASML is down, I'm pretty sure, from, and it's just like there are themes where it's best to just buy the winner, and there are themes where the benefits will be more evenly distributed, and that should be the question that you ask about. Like, should I just find the best individual stock, or should I invest in the theme as a whole?
Yeah, I think this is a semi.
Interesting. I would have said this is a hack.
No, well, if you look at the performance, like if to your point, find where the money's going, who's actually going to benefit. These ETFs are sort of 15 to 25% year to date up.
Okay.
Which, like, compare that to Europe generally, like it's reasonable outperformance, but not crazy. But you're not getting 124% like Rhine Metal or the like. So it's kind of like,
well, I love
there
that
are
because
major winners.
I love that because we've come on different sides of this issue, so no one can claim that we're giving personal financial advice.
Exactly.
So let's leave it there.
Nice. Well, we love hearing from you. Thank you so much for the question, James. As we said at the top, if you'd like to ask us a question, please leave us a voice note. There'll be a link in the description or show notes. Also, if you take a lot out of what we do, we would really appreciate it if you could spend 60 seconds just leaving a rating and a review on your podcast app, or like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. It really helps us get in front of new Equity Mates community members. But Ren, always great to chat stocks. We'll pick it up next week.
Sounds good.
I will say this about investing. Everything you do learn is cumulative. What I learned at 20 is useful.